עוזרי. שיר המעלות, ממעמקים קראתיך אדוני. אדוני שמע בקולי תהילה עוזרך קשובות לפתח אדוני.
Okay, so first, before I'll start, again, just really, mamash, 2 minutes. I know I'm not going to embarrass you, must speak, but again, just thank you, mamash, thank you for being instrumental in establishing this Beit Midrash Boker and bringing Rabbanim, Tzionim, Datiim to share Torah, which is relevant, which is modern, which address issues that are obviously of our concern. And trying to create an active Beit Midrash every week, which is to spread Torah and to bring people together and to be inspired and enriched with Torah knowledge. So, v'haya ze zchutchem, that will be a merit, besides all the other zchuyot that Baruch Hashem you definitely have. And as I said on Shabbat, bemet, it's bittersweet. We're going to miss you terribly, but we are happy for you. And wishing you Be'ezrat Hashem, bemet, all the best. I also suggested that we will bring, not Phil, but Feigi as a scholar in resident from time to time. We can take a vote after that. Okay. What I would like to address today with you, something that it's not exactly always my topic of choice with you on Thursdays. Most of the times we talk about halacha and everything, but today I would like to talk a little bit about how Chazal confronted the main issue in the parsha. There are really two main issues in the parsha. One, the stealing of the brachot, which is weird. How can you steal and still be blessed? But before that is, how can we explain Yitzhak's closeness to Esau? I spoke about it a little bit in my shiur in Beit Avichai, but today I'm going to talk about a different perspective, or additional perspective. Chazal obviously had an issue with it. How can you explain that Yitzhak loves Esau? And the Torah is very specific about it. Yitzhak ohev et Esau, Rivka ohevet et Yaakov. Esau loves, Yitzhak loves Esau, and Rivka loves Yaakov. And it seems to be strange. First lesson that we know as parents, even as young parents, we know not to discriminate. And you can't tell your kids, I love you, Abba loves you, and Ima loves you. Right? This is a recipe for a disaster. That's A. B, what's the reason to love Esau? What did Yitzhak really see in Esau that Rivka didn't? Or maybe he didn't see and he thought he can see something. Okay, so that's basically what we are going to do. So Chazal obviously had different approaches to that question, and we're going to explore some of them. So it says, Vayav Yitzchak et Esau ki tzayid befiv veRivka ohevet et Yaakov. So in Perek Kafei, we just have a statement. Basically, Yitzhak loves Esau, and we have a reason. Ki, the word ki in Hebrew is because. Because, tzayid befiv. However, the end of the sentence is what? V'rivka ohevet et Yaakov, but there is no ki, there is no reason. Which means she loves Yaakov naturally as a mother or unconditionally. But Yitzhak and Esau, it seems to be that there is a reason. Which what we will call ahava shetluya bedavar. It's a love that depends on some kind of a condition. So it's interesting. Ki tzayid befiv. What does it mean, ki tzayid befiv? Leave the mefarshim. How do you understand it without any commentators? That what? He fed him. So ki tzayid befiv shel Yitzchak. Grammatically, it's a little bit of a problem. Vayehav Yitzchak et Esav. Ki, because tzayid befiv, hand in his mouth. Who is the he? In Yitzchak's mouth or Esav's mouth? Esau.
Well, the way the sentence flows, it would seem to me tzayid befiv, because he's like Esau, tzayid befiv, his mouth.
His mouth. So the tzayid in his Esav's mouth. What does that mean? What? The what? I can't hear you. The food is in his mouth. Is that like a compliment? Is that a good description? It's interesting, right? So you can understand. I'm not going to we didn't bring it into the source sheet, but now you can understand, for example, Chazal, when they saw the pasuk, Kitzayit befiv, they asked the same question I asked, which is, what does it mean? Therefore, Chazal came along and said what? Shetzad et aviv befiv. That he deceived his father by asking him, we call it in the army, kitbek questions. Abba, how do I give myself from the salt? Okay? Do you know the people who ask the rabbis all sorts of questions that they don't need to ask? Klatzke questions, nachon, bidiyuk. So that's how Chazal got to it, because kitzayit befiv does not mean anything. So tzayit befiv, meaning he's hunting with his mouth. Meaning, Esau was someone who knew how to talk and how to deceive you. So that's very interesting. So Esau is not just a hunter, a hero, someone who is courageous, go out to the field and try to deal with animals. He is also what is hunting people with his very eloquent speech. Okay? So that's how Chazal came to it. So Yitzhak loves Esau, Rivka loves Yaakov, and we have a reason. And then, in Perek of Zayin, it says, Vayiki zaken Yitzhak. And then when Yitzhak get older, Vatichena einav mereot, and his eyes had some difficulties to see. Vayikra et Esav bno agadol, and he called Esav his oldest, or his older son. Vayomer elav bni, it says to him, my son. Vayomer elav hineni. The second part of the pasuk sounds great and sounds very familiar. Who else says hineni? Avraham. Nachon? Moshe Rabbeinu. This is a statement of someone who is ready for a mission. So, also as a side note, this is not my topic, but I just want to give you some food for thought. You know, Chazal goes out of their way to try to portray Esau as a villain, as a bad guy. Why? In order to justify the fact that he didn't get the brachot and that Yaakov stole it. He stole it in order to save us from Esau getting the brachot. But the narrative itself does not reflect that Esau was so terrible. I will even tell you something that I know you can reject it, but this is my opinion. It's okay? When Esau realized that Yaakov stole the blessings, he says what? I'm going to kill him. But when? Only after my father dies. Now, I know. To kill your brother is not nice. But Cain did it without waiting for Adam to die. Joseph's brothers didn't think that they maybe should throw him into the pit or sell him as a slave only after Yaakov dies, meaning Esau was very considerate. He didn't want to hurt his father. He says, okay, I'll wait to kill him, which has some mercy and compassion over his own father, which, by the way, 22 years later, Yaakov was afraid that the merit that Esau has in Kibud Horim will override his zchuyot. So, the idea is that we have what the narrative has to say, and then we have what Chazal had to say, and there was obviously a need. So we can see it already in the psukim themselves. Okay. So obviously the question is, why do I care that Yitzchak's eyes were compromised, that he couldn't really see? Just to tell me that when you get older, your eyesight is becoming worse. That's not a necessary detail. So in Bereshit Rabbah, it says the following. Bereshit Rabbah is a Midrash Agada around the 5th or 6th century in Eretz Israel. Vayiki zaken Yitzchak. Rabbi Yitzhak patach. Rabbi Yitzhak made an opening statement. Matzdikei rasha ekev shochad. People who justify a wicked person, it's because of what? They take bribe. Kol mi shenotel shochad, everyone who takes bribe, who matzdik et harasha, and justify the evil person, be'ekev v'tzidkat tzadikim yasuru mimenu. So the righteous people will remove themselves from him. Tzidkat tzadikim ze Moshe, yasuru mimenu ze Yitzchak. Sheyitzdik et harasha kahu einav. Esau basically gave bribe to Yitzchak by giving him what? Food, by sustaining him. And therefore Yitzchak was blind or his eyes were compromised because he took bribe. That's severe to blame our father Yitzhak of taking bribe. And because he took bribe, he couldn't see the deficiencies and the faults that Esau had. Now, you understand that Rabbi Yitzhak, who was an Amorah in Eretz Israel around the 4th century, obviously had tremendous respect to Yitzhak. By the way, his name was Yitzhak too, Rabbi Yitzhak. So Rabbi Yitzhak says on Yitzhak that he took bribe. What does it mean he took bribe? Well, he took an envelope underneath the table? Like, what exactly happened? The answer is probably that Yitzhak enjoyed so much Esau's supplies of food that he couldn't see any faults. Which means, I guess that Esau made like a chef dinner to Yitzhak almost every night, and Yitzhak basically became so attached to Esau that he couldn't see anything else. So in terms of bribe, it's not that he gave him an envelope, but he made certain things that Yitzhak couldn't resist the temptation, and therefore he couldn't see any problems with Esau. But this is a very severe accusation, to say that Yitzhak took bribe and to read the pasuk on Yitzhak. Now,
Isn't there a question when you know how to speak bribe? That's the distinction of the bribe. And that's the same bribe that Prime Minister took money knowingly, put it away. Another, just he was being schmaltzed up.
Okay, so Phil suggests that, you know what, maybe there is a distinction between here is an envelope, I put it on the table, you know exactly what it is for, and enjoy the bribe, or just to be schmaltz, yeah, like, to be talked to be friendly with. But even that, we know that you are not allowed to do. According to the Gemara, for example, I think it was Ravuna, he had an aris that gave him, every Friday afternoon, he gave him a basket of fruits from his own field, from Ravuna's field. This guy was just an employee. This guy had a court date, and Ravuna was supposed to be the judge. I think it was Ravuna. And Ravuna says, I can't be the judge. Even though it's my field, it's my fruits. But because you bring it to me, and you basically save me the time to go and to take it, so I get some kind of an enjoyment, it's almost like bribe. I'm not interested in judging you. So obviously we have something like that even if it's not quote-unquote mamash bribe by law, you don't want, it's very hard to see deficiencies by someone that you really like.
It's keep it up, man. It's like, it's service.
More. It's more than kibud avim.
Well,
So it seems to be that it's Esau created dependency, which I'm sure Rivka was a good cook. How do I know that she was a good cook? No. She was the one who prepared for her husband when Yaakov came in, right? And Yaakov ate it. So she was a good cook. So there was food at home. But Esau probably did something that what? That was more, or overdue in order to what? To create this connection. Rega. So, yes.
Why the assumption that Yitzhak did it other than he loved his father?
That's Alvin's question. Yeah.
The other thing is, if he did it for Yitzhak, why would Yitzhak think, I have a son that's so kind to do it for other people?
Okay, it might be that what Esau wanted to convey. Like, I'm so kind to you, and I'm sure I'm very kind to everyone else. But he was not, according to Chazal, not the narrative. The narrative does not, that's why I said it in the introduction, Chazal goes out of their way to portray Esau as a villain. And you are right, and Elvin, you are right too. What do you want? If I will tell you that one of your children is bringing you dinner every day, even though you can afford to go to a restaurant or you can still cook, but he brings you dinner every day, what would you say about this child? Wonderful son or wonderful daughter. And if it's your son-in-law or daughter-in-law, maybe different. But basically, if that's your own children, you will say what? Wonderful, right? Wonderful children. Then you will call your friends. Tell them, right? My kids bring me dinner every day. What about yours? Like to make you feel bad about yourself. So the thing is that you are right, you are correct. But what I'm saying is that because of that, you see that Chazal are trying hard not to go that route.
You know, the Havdil, according to American law, bribery is only an issue when the person that you're trying to bribe is an official, an important person, a king, a president, a senator, somebody who has obligations beyond themselves. Okay? In this case, what we're doing also is we're looking at the status of Yitzhak. Okay? And Yitzhak knows what his status is because of the promise to Abraham. Okay, that's coming through him, and because of the Akedah, which put him in a different league. Even in American law, there's something called offering an illegal gratuity, which is short of bribery, but it's you come and offer something like a nice piece of meat, a cigar, one of these things, and you can go to prison as a felon for doing that. So it's really important that we focus on Yitzchak's position in terms of how he's accepting this, because he knows who he is.
Okay, so basically Bob suggested, he says, look, the eyes are on Yitzhak because you know who you are. You're not a politician, but you are the legacy of Abraham. You need to know that if someone treats you like that, be careful, even if it's kibud horim. Okay? Even if it's kibud horim.
I think this whole behavioral thing on the part of Esau also, and maybe there are midrashim or something that suggest this, kind of alludes to the fact that in the womb, Esau probably overpowered Yaakov in order to be the first one out.
Right. So I'm not going to go to that midrashim because I want to focus dafka on Yitzhak. But I agree, there is criticism, rabbinic criticism, on how come Yitzhak allowed that thing to happen. Okay? So one example or one explanation is he was blind. Why was he blind? That's obviously the question, because the Torah says, "Vayhi ki zaken Yitzchak vatichena einav merot." If that's a natural decline of your eyesight, Avram should have that same thing too. The only one that we know that got older and his eyes were not compromised, Moshe, lo chahata. Same language. Okay? So first explanation is he took some kind of bribe. Yes? Yeah, that's obviously the understanding here. But the question is, why is it called shochad? That's basically what was said here. Okay. In a way, there is a little bit of they alluding a little bit to your question, and they say, Rabbi Yitzhak patach, another Rabbi Yitzhak, עוד זין, ושוחד לא תיקח, אמר רבי יצחק, ומה אם מי שנטל שוחד ממי שהיה חייב לו קהו עיניו, הלוקח שוחד ממי שאינו חייב לו על אחת כמה וכמה. Basically, it says, if you take shochad, so to speak, from someone who owes it to you, kibud horim, your eyes get blind because it's considered shochad. If you take for someone who doesn't owe you a thing, al achat kama v'chama, even more. So there is some kind of notion that there is kibud horim here, but we say it was too much. Okay, so that's first explanation. Now take a look at the second one. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa patach, רבות עשית אתה השם אלוקי נפלאותיך. You did a lot, God, and all of what you do are wonders in my eyes. אמר רבי חנינא, כל פעולות ומחשבות שפעלת אלינו בשבילנו. God, everything you did, even though we cannot see it now, but at the end it's for us. It's for our benefit. Hard to say it while we are in the middle of a war, but Bezrat Hashem, I think we all have at least a feeling that we're going to have a good ending to this conflict, to this story. So, what does that have anything to do with Yitzhak? Lama kahu einav shel Yitzhak? What is the reason that Yitzhak's eyes were compromised? Kedei she'yavo Yaakov ve'itol et habrachot. So Yaakov can come and take the blessings. Now, come on. Can't you make it a little easier? Like, Yitzhak ohev et Yaakov. he can see that Yaakov is a wonderful person, and he calls him up and say, get the brachot. Why do I need to go like that? Answer. This is interesting. Yaakov had to go through a transformative change of his personality. And what do I mean by that? We all know the explanation of the Netziv, that Yitzhak thought that Esau should be the main successor in partnership with Yaakov. If you look at the narrative itself of the brachot, basically there are two brachot. There is Birkat Avraham, which Yitzhak gives to Yaakov when, at the end, before he leaves to Haran, ייתן לך השם את ברכת אברהם, לך ולזרעך איתך. What is ברכת אברהם? Land, ונברחו בך כל משפחות האדמה, you will be father of all nations. That was the blessing that Yitzhak probably intended to give to Yaakov, nothing to do with Esau. He wanted to give Esau all the materialistic, physical blessings. Yitzhak thought that there will be like Issachar and Zvulun. Esau will be the hunter. He will sustain Yaakov where in Yoshev Ohalim, and Yaakov will carry on the spiritual legacy. That's what Yitzhak thought. B, don't forget, and this is a little bit of psychology, Yitzhak was traumatized. Because of what? Not only because of the Akedah, even before the Akedah. Can you imagine as a child, you wake up in the morning, and then your half-brother is gone, and then when you ask your mother, where is he? She does not want to answer you, and then you go to the father and he's crying. Because Abraham loved Ishmael. According to the Midrashim, he went to visit him every month, took care of him, and then later on, according to some Midrashim, I'm not saying that it's according to all, he got remarried with Hagar after Sarah died, which definitely Abraham felt a lot for Ishmael. He prayed for him, Lu Ishmael, yichyeh lefanecha. So the thing is, Yitzhak did not want to repeat the same thing. To what? To reject one son. So he says, let's create what? Partnership. The thing is that he was wrong. Well, I'll just finish the sentence. What does it mean he was wrong? He thought that they will be able to do what? To create this partnership. But he did not realize that Yaakov can do both. We can be immersed in this world, and at the same time we can be Yoshev Ohalim. There is no separation. I think you heard something there, shiur before. Yeah. There is no Yoshev Ohalim and Yotzei Tzava. Okay, you can do both. Not only that you can do both, you should do both. So the idea is that Yitzhak missed the boat. He misunderstood that one person can do both. However, Yaakov had to show him that he can. When you look at Yaakov's life, he is probably the most distant person from sitting in a tent learning Torah all day long. Most of his life is what? Working, business tourists. Until he left Israel, he was an Ishtam, Yoshev Ohalim, whatever that means, by the way. And after that, for 22 years he's being abused at work, and we learn many of the laws of employees from Yaakov. Does not sleep, day, night, summer, winter, fall, whatever, snow, sun, he is there with the flock. And then he comes back, and there is a war, and he tries to possess land, and then there are tourists with the family, and then he needs to go down to Egypt. I don't know how much time he had for learning. Yaakov had to show what? That he is able to confront real people. Yaakov all his life wanted to fled, to run away from his mission. The time that he was not able to run away was when? 2 weeks from now, in Vayishlach, when the angel captures him and basically says to him, you're not going anywhere, you are fighting. כי שרית עם אלוקים ועם אנשים, נו, ותוכל. What is ותוכל? לא לאכול, not to eat. ותוכל, you are able to overcome them, which means stop running away. you can confront your enemies. So Yaakov had to go through the process of what? Of lying to his father, to show that he can also deal with problems. With Lavan, he also knew how to deal with him after 22 years later. It's interesting. Chazal, they look at the conversation between Yaakov and Yitzhak when he came to steal the blessings, and they try to create that it was not a full deception. For example, when Yitzhak asked him, "Who are you?" he says, "Anochi Esav bechorecha," which basically the real understanding is, "I am your son Esau." However, Chazal says, read it the following: "Anochi, pause, I am, but Esau is your first son." Nice, but not so accurate. Okay? So, but you understand why Chazal tried to mitigate and to minimize the deception, but still there was a deception. By the way, according to Onkelos, if you read the Targum, Onkelos says, "Ba achicha be'orma." Your brother came. What is orma? Deception. Onkelos translated as what? Bechochmata. With wisdom. ברור שיש משהו, but orma, if you go to Bereshit, who was the first arum? The Nachash. הנחש היה arum. There, that Onkelos does not say בchochmata. Okay? Why? Because you don't want to defend the Nachash, but you want to defend Yaakov. So the idea is that according to this midrash, Yaakov is being blind not as a punishment, but exactly the opposite, to allow Yaakov to show his true colors and to show that he can do both. He can carry the spiritual legacy and he can carry the material and the physical world. In a way, Yitzhak is going through another Akedah. He is suffering, so his son will be able to prove himself, which is interesting. Yes, I'm sorry, I put you on hold.
Abraham was told Yishmael called Sarah, which means he had to look after Yishmael because she wanted to let him go, and he didn't want to let him go.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like a contradiction between Abraham and Yitzhak. Yitzhak loved Esau. Abraham hated Ishmael. He loved Ishmael as well. So
Right.
they were the same.
I might like
Abraham
loved Ishmael and Yitzhak loved Esau.
loved Esau.
Right, but the question is why? So I'm saying Yitzhak loved Esau because he thought he and Yaakov can be partners. Avraham, even if Hashem will tell him, okay, Yitzhak יקרא לך זרע, he might do it and leave Ishmael on the side, but not to reject him totally. I think what he didn't like is the rejection. Yeah, so I'm saying he had to listen to Sarah, but he himself couldn't resist the love that he had towards Ishmael. So what I said is that just Yitzhak psychologically maybe couldn't reject Esau, and he tried to find for him a place in the family. Okay, so the second explanation is, so we saw the bribe, then the second one was what? To allow Yaakov to go through a transformative change in order to show his true personality. Now, Amar Rabbi Yehuda bar Simon, the last paragraph on page 1. אמר רבי יהודה בר סימון, אברהם תבע זקנה. אמר לפניו, ריבון העולמים, אדם ובנו נכנסים למקום, ואין אדם יודע למי מכבד, מתוך שאתה מעטרו בזקנה, אדם יודע למי מכבד. אמר לה, הקדוש ברוך הוא, חייך, דבר טוב תבעת, וממך הוא מתחיל, מתחילת הספר ועד כאן אין כתיב זקנה, וכיוון שעמד אברהם, נתן לו זקנה, ואברהם זקן בא בימים. So this midrash basically is going to what? To tell you, how come that until Avram, for example, it doesn't mention that someone became a zaken, old person. We know that people lived much longer than Avram. Avram was what, 175 when he died? And Adam HaRishon lived till 930. Terach and not Terach, Metushelach, and all of them lived until, 870, whatever it was. So, and none of them was called Zaken. So how come Avram was called Zaken? So Avram says to Hashem, Hashem, please, give me Zikna. Why? Because, if not, you go with your child, and people don't know who is the child and who is the father. By the way, look at how modern life is exactly the opposite. Right? parents, grandparents try to do everything that they can in order to look like their children. Okay, it's interesting, but the idea is that at least in the ancient world, Avram says it doesn't work well. Give me zikna. So Hashem says, okay, I'll give you zikna, white beard, you look like older person, and then everyone will recognize that you are the father and Yitzhak is the son. Okay. Now, what about Yitzhak? Says the Gemara, says the Midrash, Yitzhak tava yisurin. Yitzhak demanded suffering. Why? אמר לפניו ריבון כל העולמים, אדם מת ולא ייסורים, מידת הדין מתוחה כנגדו, מתוך שאתה מביא עליו ייסורים, אין מידת הדין מתוחה כנגדו. אמר לו הקדוש ברוך הוא, חייך, דבר טוב טבעת, ממך אני מתחיל. מתחילת הספר ועד כאן אין כתיב ייסורים, וכיוון שעמד יצחק נתן לו ייסורים, ויהי כי זקן יצחק ותיכנה. I'm translating. Yitzhak says to Hashem, look, I demand that I'll suffer a bit here. Why? Because I don't want to die without any suffering, because when I come to the Olam Haba, the judgment will be against me. So I would like to have some judgment here, so I will be better in the world to come. Okay, this is a theology of suffering comes as a punishment or whatever. I'm not dealing with that. But what I'm saying is that this Midrash says that Yitzchak's issues with his eyesight came as a request from Yitzhak. Meaning Yitzhak asked to have some kind of suffering, so in Olam Haba, he will not need to deal with judgment. So according to this Midrash, that has nothing to do with what? With Esau, nothing to do with Yaakov, nothing to do with anyone. It's all to do with Yitzhak himself. He demanded it. Now tell me, please, do you know any other Midrash that says also something along the lines that Yitzhak asked for something that was not necessarily for his own benefit? The Akedah itself. Rashi brings the Midrash about the pasuk Vayi achar hadvarim haele ve'Elokim nisa et Avraham, and it happened after these things that Avraham was tested. What are these things? So Rashi brings the Midrash, others bring other interpretation, but Rashi brings the Midrash that Ishmael says to Yitzchak, you think you're going to be Avraham's successor? I should be. I was 13 years old when our father told me that we need to do Brit Milah. He was 99. Sorry, he was 80. No, he was 99. I was 13. I could tell my father what? You go ahead and do it. I'm 13 years old. I'm not doing it. But I did. You didn't do a thing. Your Brit was 8 days old. So therefore, you have no claim to be Avraham's successor. And Yitzchak says, you know what? If God would ask me to sacrifice myself for him, my entire body, I will do it. And Hashem says, you know what? Okay, let's try it. This is a Midrash that Rashi brings. You look at the Chumash. Rashi brings two Midrashim. This is the second one. Now, leave alone that according to this Midrash, was it Akedat Avraham or Akedat Yitzchak? Interesting, right? That's what the pasuk says. But according to the Midrash, it really seems to be that it's a nisayon leYitzchak, which is bichlal. Maybe one time we'll learn the Akedah. It's very interesting. What exactly is the nisayon for whom, or for both? If it's both, so why we call it Akedat Yitzchak? But according to that, yes, that he will not move. Right. So you see that Yitzhak is basically asking for things that demand self-sacrifice to some extent. So that's Yitzhak's personality to some extent. Yes?
But in that, where Yitzhak is saying that Ishmael is a midrash.
Yeah.
Does Ishmael answer it all?
No, I'm sure Ishmael was very happy. He says, go ahead, try it out.
But he didn't. Okay, that.
Yeah, Ishmael did not respond. The Midrash is not interested in what Ishmael has to say. They want to explain how come that Yitzhak was willing to do it. Answer is, it's not that he was only willing to do it, he asked for it. In order to show how much dedication he has to Hashem, which is very interesting because we know, we Jews, we're not looking to die for Kiddush Hashem. We are looking for lichyot for Kiddush Hashem. If there is a situation of Kiddush Hashem, we will do it. but we're not looking for it, right? We don't live our lives in order to die in Kiddush Hashem. Okay. Now, page 2, Ot Yud, another midrash. By the way, you can see from the multiplicity of reasons that what? That A, it bothered the rabbis. They didn't know what to do with it, A. And B, you see that each one of them has a different take on what exactly is going on there. Okay. ותיכנה עיניו מאוד. אמר רב אלעזר בן עזריה, מרעות ברע. מרעות ברעתו של רשע. אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא, יהיה יצחק יוצא לשוק. ויון בריאת האמרין דין אבוה דהו רשיע. אלא הריני מחאה את עיניו והוא יושב בביתו. הדה הוא דכתיב, בקום רשעים יסתר אדם. מכאן אמרו כל המעמיד בן רשע או תלמיד רשע סוף שעיניו כהות. Which means what? This midrash said something totally different. Esau was a bad guy. He was an evil person. He would not only be a hunter, he will steal women, he will steal money, he will be a cheater and a liar and all of that.
How do we know that?
Oh, we don't, but that's what we are saying. And Yitzhak, if he will be able to see and everything, he will go to the shuk, right, to the marketplace, to buy a few things, to buy vegetables, to buy whatever. And people will look at Yitzhak and will say, what? Ah, this is the father. This is the father of this Rasha. Terrible, shame, shanda. So in order to what? To prevent this embarrassment from Yitzhak, Hashem took his eyesight, so he will need to what? To sit at home, so he will not be embarrassed outside. Okay. Now, really nice. But what about Rivka? She should also be blind, right?
No, she wasn't blind.
She was what?
She wasn't blind.
Ah. No, but I'm saying...
She could see who he was.
No, but if she goes to the marketplace, what? They're not going to say, ah, this is the mama?
No, she knows Yaakov.
But still, that's her son. Esau is her son too. I mean, Yitzhak didn't give birth to Esau through a Holy Spirit. Yes?
Who's responsible for chinuch for the child? It's the father.
Maybe it should be both. Al titosh Torah timecha. Oh, יפה, she never left the house, נכון? Here you have a proof that the women should not leave the house, right? And it might be according to the Midrash, by the way. We're talking about the 4th, 5th century or 6th century. Maybe women didn't go anywhere. It might be. Or that Rivka could take it. Yitzhak, it will be an embarrassing thing. Why? With Rivka, everyone knows, oh, she came from what? From Lavan. Lavan was the brother. But there is Betuel, and this is a mishpacha shel Ramaim. No, betach, they're not going to embarrass her, they're just going to look at her and say, now we understand, right? But with Yitzhak, who came from Avraham, everyone will say, busha, it's a shanda, it's an embarrassment. Yes?
But also it says Abraham gave birth to Yitzhak and Yitzhak was Abraham's son, because they look the same. So it would be an advancement to not only Yitzhak, to Abraham.
Yafeh, also to Avraham. So the idea is, according to this midrash, it's not bribe. It's not to allow Yaakov to be his own personality. It's not about what? It's not about that Yitzhak demanded it. It's Hashem wanted to protect Yitzhak from embarrassment, which is a totally different idea, because the suffering that Yitzhak went through was not in order to what? To clear him for Olam Haba. It's not because he took bribe. It was for his own good. So in a way, there is a hidden lesson in this midrash that sometimes suffering is not necessarily because of a punishment or because something wrong that you did, but exactly the opposite. It's in order to what? No? To protect you. You can see the theological issue between the midrashim regarding what? Suffering. What's the purpose of suffering? This purpose of suffering is in order to punish you for your sins so you will be cleaner, pure, more pure, or it's nothing to do with it. It might be that it's come to what? To protect you. Okay. דבר אחר, the one before the last one. מראות, מכוח אותה ראייה שבשעה שעקד אברהם אבינו את בנו על גבי המזבח, בכו מלאכי השרת. הדה הוא דכתיב, אין ערנים צעקו חוצה, ונשרו דמעות מעיניהם לתוך עיניו, והיו רשומות בתוך עיניו, וכיוון שהזקין קהו עיניו. What does that mean? when Yitzhak was bound on the Mizbeach, he opened his eyes, and the ministering angels, the Malachei Asharet, cried, and their tears came into his eyes, and then later on in his life, it affected his eyesight. So first, that has nothing to do with what? With bribe, with nothing. Okay. I don't understand it. I mean, I do, but we will play around, right? You have the tears of those ministering angels into his eyes. So if they should make him blind, they should make him blind what? On the spot, not to wait until he's 100 and something years old. And if you want to tell me that they keep it until the old age, why is that the introduction to the blessings? What does have anything to do with each other? What do you think? Yes?
He wasn't only physically blind or physically impaired in his vision, he was psychologically blind as well. I don't know if there's a connection between the tears of the angels and the psychological blindness.
Okay. When we want to understand this midrash, what do we need to do? First, to try to simplify it. Right? If I would give you this midrash, I know you went to school many, many years ago, but if I will give you shiurei bait, right? I'll give you homework. I'll give you this midrash, and I will tell you, solve it for me, please. Give me some ideas that the midrash has to address, okay? What should you do? You look at this midrash, and you first need to what? To try to define a few things. A, what is the purpose of ministering angels? Where else do we hear about them? What do they do? What's their role? Right? What's their position? And then when I understand that, it will be a little bit easier for me to understand the connection between the ministering angels and Yitzhak. That's A. B, why did they cry? Stop crying. Try to what? To save the guy. Right? I would expect the ministering angels to go to Hashem and say to him what? What are you doing? He's Avram's successor. Why would you want to kill him? Right? Okay. And the third thing is, angels has tears? Apparently. Right? It's קצת מוזר. Okay, so this entire thing is a little strange. Yes?
What was the malach that said to stop him kid?
Right, that's true. Hashem sent a malach and to stop him, which was also a little interesting. Like, if you are the one to commend him, you should be the one to tell him, don't do it, or you misunderstood me. Okay? But let's leave that for a story, a shiur about the Akedah. Yes? No.
So it seems that maybe the idea of this is basically to absolve Yitzhak from any responsibility for the perceptions that he had and the decisions that he made with regard to Yaakov and Esau. Because this was all external. The angels caused him to be blind. And he had nothing to do with that, really. And it affected the way he behaved during the whole episode between the Yaakov.
Okay.
And so he bears really no responsibility. It's not his fault. It's something to absolve him.
Okay, so to try to exonerate him, to absolve him, to basically say it's not his fault, I thought you will take it a little bit to a different approach, but it's just an additional approach. Okay, no, go ahead, and then I'll do my spiel.
Rav Kook is very clear on the fact that suffering, war, tragedy is necessary for the greatness that follows and comes from it. And if this is the methodology that HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses to advance those processes throughout the historical process, and the ministering angels have the unfortunate job of accompanying us during our most tragic times, during our most difficult times, our times of suffering, I can imagine why they would cry.
Okay. So crying is not a physical crying, it's a sympathy with the Jewish tragedy or difficulties.
Or even regret.
Or even regret. Okay. I would like to suggest to you something different. Not that it's not true. I think there are many ways to understand the Midrash. I just wanted to suggest to you the following. This connection between the ministering angels and Yitzhak basically put Yitzhak now where? In a connection with the ministering angels. Which means after the Akedah, Yitzhak definitely was not the same Yitzhak he was before. Not only that, we know he stayed on Har HaMoriah for another 2 years. He was not there when his mom passed away. He was not there at the funeral. We know that from the narrative itself. No midrashim, just the narrative itself. Which means Yitzhak was on a totally different spiritual level. Sometimes people on a very high spiritual level cannot relate and cannot see people who do bad things because they have this spiritual view on people. They might be very naive, they cannot see that someone can do something wrong, or they will try to give it a different interpretation. By the way, it also goes vice versa, which means sometimes when we think that someone else is in a very spiritual level, and we think that he or she will do no wrong, and surprise, surprise, they are not exactly angels. Okay? We have examples on both ends. So the idea is, it might be that this Midrash basically saying, because of the Akedah, in a way, Yitzhak lost sight of the ability to see Esau for what he was. And I will say to you that it's not only psychological, it's spiritual. This is sometimes a problem. When people become too spiritual and they are losing groundedness, you will say, to be grounded, they lose the ability to lead. And they lose the ability to manage people or to help people because they are just in a totally different sphere. I will tell you, this is very interesting. I saw it, I think, maybe at the Malbim. Maybe the Malbim in last week's Parsha, when Sarah says to Avraham, Garesh et ben ha'ama hazot, get rid of Ishmael and Sarah. He says, I don't understand. It says, She'aya tafela benevu'ah. That Avraham was what? Tafel. What is tafel? Secondary to Sarah benevu'ah, in prophecy. But he says, how come? Hashem spoke to Avraham more times than he spoke to Sarah. So he says there are two different things. There is nevuah and there is ruach HaKodesh. There is an ability, what I will call, to understand a reality and to understand the prediction. That if I go from here, it will be A, B, and C, and even take some tough decisions like what Sarah did. And then there is a prophecy, things that will happen in 3,000 years from now. And for that, you don't need to necessarily be attached to reality. You know what? Not only that you don't need to be attached to reality, in a way you need to what? To raise yourself above the reality. One of the prime examples is Rabbi Akiva in Makot Kavdalet, in Gemara Makot, at page 24. When he saw the fox coming out from Kodesh HaKodeshim, he started what? Laughing. And they ask him, why are you laughing? And he says, now I see that Uriah's prophecy, Bet Mikdash Rishon, that Zion Sadeh Techaresh was fulfilled. Now I know that Zechariah, who was a prophet in the second Bet Mikdash, his prophecy will be fulfilled. And what? Od Yeshvus Kenimus Kenot. You see a fox. He is totally what we call detached from reality. But no, he can see in the reality already what? The redemption. Okay. Last one. What does it mean? ותיכנה עיניו מרעות? מכוח אותה הראייה שבשעה שעקד אברהם אבינו את יצחק בנו על גבי המזבח, תלה עיניו במרום והביט בשכינה. מושלים אותו משל למה הדבר דומה למלך שהיה מטייל בפתח פלטין שלו, ותלה עיניו וראה בנו של אוהבו מציץ עליו בעד החלון, אמר אם הורגו אני עכשיו מכריע אני את אוהבי, אלא גוזרני שיסתמו חלונותיו. כך בשעה שהעקיד אברהם את בנו על גבי המזבח, תלה עיניו והביט בשכינה, אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא אם הורגו אני עכשיו אני מכריע את אברהם אוהבי, אלא גוזר אני שיחו עיניו. Which means what? I know I read it quickly. When Yitzhak was on the Mizbeach, he looked up and he saw the Shekhinah. He saw God. Now, we know that, can you see God while you are alive? No. Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai, right? If you see God, you need to be dead. So when Yitzhak saw God, he basically had to die at that moment. But Hashem says, I can't kill him. If I'll kill him, I also will kill Avraham. Avraham will not be able to what? To tolerate it. So I'm not going to do it. I'm going to wait. And what am I going to do? I'm going to make him blind. And we know that sumah hashuv kemet. Some blind person is considered like a dead person. So here we have something very interesting. When we see vatichena einav merot, it's not a punishment, and it's not to defend him. It's basically what? It's what? Protection. Protection to whom? To Avraham, not to Yitzhak. Yitzhak had to die on that moment when he saw the Shekhinah. But God had mercy on Abraham, and he waited, and he punished Yitzhak in a different way. Which is also interesting. Because, in a way, this is a true punishment, but not in order to make clear Yitzhak, but it's a payout for what? For a sin that Yitzhak did many years ago, and it had to be the payday came along, and he made him blind. Now, when I see all these multiple explanations, it's like a good Tosfot. When you give multiple answers, you know that what? That A, none of them is good enough to stand by his own, and B, there are many options. And by the way, I have mercy on you. I have more midrashim. We could sit here almost all day long to try to find different reasons. Which do I prefer? All of them. All the above and none of the above. Which means I really like, because I like the theory behind it, is that Yitzhak had to be blind in order to allow Yaakov to become Yaakov. I love it because it's relevant to me. Because it shows that we can do both. Not only that we can, we should do both. We should be one regel in the tent and one regel where? In the field, and to have it both. Not a problem. I love it because it's relevant to me. It talks to me. But the other options are good as well. Now, after Yitzhak is done, in a way, according to the last Midrash, we have something interesting. In a way, Yitzhak is done. When Yaakov leaves, we don't hear anything about Yitzhak anymore. That's it. Yitzhak is still alive. He's alive after Rivka is dead. How do we know? Because when Yaakov comes back 2 weeks from now, he's going to see his father Yitzhak. Yitzhak is alive. But what do we know about Yitzhak since he says goodbye to Yaakov? Klum. Nothing. Why? Because in a way he went back to the Akedah. So if he was able to be raised spiritually to this level, that's also the way he ended up. Well, with Yitzhak? Yeah, he did. So he didn't participate. He was just totally silent. Yeah. So, what's the lesson? Okay. First, to understand that Chazal can offer different explanations. It's not one. There is no one explanation. With every explanation, obviously you have the advantages and disadvantages in every explanation. Some of them fit more to the narrative, some of them are less. And the third one is that the lessons that we can get from each one of them in order to build for ourselves what exactly is going on in the story. What I like to do is that to ask everyone to raise your knowledge more than what you learn in Gan Yeladim. Okay? With the puppets. With Yitzhak, with Yaakov and Esau.
What's the common thread between them?
That we don't know.
Whoa. There's something very important that you never mentioned in all of this.
Which is?
Even though you were talking all around it the whole time. Tshuva.
Of?
Tshuva of each of the actors. The way that they become greater, the way they become holier, is because they go through suffering. They even ask for suffering.
But one is not.
Huh?
One person is not going through any tshuva. Esau. That's my problem. Okay.
That's right.
Right.
But Esau is the one who sets out the example that Yaakov loves, which is a hunter with his mouth. And it's hunting with his mouth that enables Yaakov to do what he did.
Yeah, but there is no tshuva on Esau's part. He might encourage.
That's because Esau is evil.
Okay, so. So, as I said before, and I'm going to conclude, I'm not going to do another shiur. What I'm saying is, Esau, based on the narrative, is not the most evil guy, like the way the sages portray him to be. However, you do find hints, remazim, in the narrative that alludes to the fact that he was not exactly the greatest guy, but not as much as Chazal portray him because of a reason. Obviously, there is a reason that Chazal tried to do it. Ve'idach zilgmor.